This series is presented by the National Dropout Prevention Center, a division of SPN, the Successful Practices Network. The pandemic's impact on at-risk students, schools, and learning was presented live to the South Carolina Department of Education by Dr. Sandy Addis, the chairman of the National Dropout Prevention Center, on his recent publication co-authored by Ray McNulty with an introduction from Dr. Bill Daggett.
Here is an actual situation that a principal shared with me. This was the progression of thinking of a student that he brought back in. He recovered. He said the student said about the school closure. School was closed. I did virtual instruction. It was okay, I guess. In other words, he wasn't too excited about it. Then he said, school's reopened, and the kid says, I returned to school. The counselor told me I'm behind. I'm behind in 3 subjects. Then he says, school offered me free summer school for credit recovery. And then he says, I'm out of here. I quit. This is too much. I can't do this. This is not what I want. It wasn't my fault. And so this is a sequence that we are afraid we're going to see, particularly with older kids, as they re-enter the doors of school. If we can find them, if we get them back, then we're afraid they're going to say, well, you got to be kidding me. This wasn't my fault. I tried. I tried to sign on to that dadgum thing. I tried to get a hold of the teacher. I couldn't get it. My connection wouldn't work. My laptop broke. And I didn't have a good place to do it at home. And now you're telling me I'm in the same grade again? You got to be kidding. I quit. And so we may well see this very scenario happen over and over if we aren't careful, particularly in our high schools. Here's another thing to consider. Student engagement is created over time. It can't be turned back on like a light switch. When we get these kids back in, we must engage them. We must do something or treat them in some fashion that will help them want to be here. School needs to be the place they want to be. Now, they'll be happy to come back to see their friends, we hope, if they still have them. We hope that they are happy to come back and participate in sports and have the activities and the fun stuff. But engagement is a big topic. Engagement means for students, this is my place. This is where I want to be. I like these people. I like being here. And I even like the instruction. This is fun stuff. I like school. And that's not just something that happens instantly. It can't just be recreated. So we've got to understand that as these kids come back into school, the engagement factor is diminished, if not gone. And we've got to do things to engage them rather than say, welcome back, you're credit deficient. Another thing we've got to consider, and many of you are administrators and in various administrative roles, and when you consider the whole school, let's say we've got a school before the pandemic that had 20% of the students that were truant, overage for grade, behavior problems, or disengaged. It could have been 5%, it could have been 10%, 15, 25%. Let's say it was 20%. And let's say that we had 80% of the kids that had good attendance, they were on track to graduate, they were well behaved, and they were engaged in school. In other words, we had about 20% at-risk students, and we had about 80% not at-risk students, and that was our school, and that's where I work, that's where we do business, that's where we provide services, and think for yourself a minute what that school would be like and how it would be for you as an educator to work and live in that school. And then what if, when we come back after the pandemic, what if it looks like this? What if we have doubled the number of at-risk students? What if we now have 40% of the students that are truant, 40% of the kids that are overage for grade, 40% of the kids that are exhibiting behavior problems, 40% of the kids that are disengaged with us and with instruction? That is a very different school. And what we're concerned about is that we may open many of our schools in South Carolina in the next 3 or 4 weeks. And we won't show this on the signboard out front. We won't know it. We won't have data that shows it, but it'll start to show up over the weeks as we begin school. And that is that it's a different bunch of kids. We've got more at-risk kids, more kids with these issues than we had. And then the question becomes, how do we as educators deal with that? And one of the things I'm concerned about as a school board member, we've got several thousand teachers in Anderson 5. And I'm concerned that some of our teachers about the third or fifth week of school are going to have a little bit of shock when they begin to see that I've got a lot more kids that are not attending. I've got a lot more kids that are showing behavior problems than I had before this thing happened. What am I going to do? And so we need to be prepared for that possibility. It could very well happen to us in our schools. Now, South Carolina has had a pretty respectable graduation rate over the years. As you know, we count graduation rate as a 4-year cohort rate, where we take the number of kids that begin the 9th grade and compare them to the number of kids that walk across the stage 4 years later. And then the percentage that make it are our graduates. And 2020, we had 82.2% 4-year cohort graduation rate, meaning that we were graduating about 82% of our kids. We picked up another 1 or 2% for GEDs and 5th-year graduates probably. And that was very close to the national average. South Carolina has historically, back 10, 15, 20 years ago, we were dismal in our graduation rates, but we've caught up a good bit. It's not good, but it's better. It's better than it was. And so now we have this history of a pretty respectable graduation rate pattern in the state. Here's my concern. What's it going to be in 2022? 2021 is going to be hard to figure, for one thing, but everybody's scrambling to figure out where the kids are and what happened to them. But what about 2022? What about 2024? Is it possible that we could see a significant decline in our graduation rate? What if we had in a particular school, what if we had a much higher number of 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders that had to be retained in grade after the pandemic shut down because they did not make academic progress during virtual instruction? What if we had those 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders retained, and then they matriculate up through the system? And what's going to happen to us when they turn 16 and 17 in 2025, 2027? We could have some real problems there. So we've got to be alert to this situation, and we've got to get ahead of it. We can't just let it happen to us.